Wine Stories, a podcast to discover the world of wine by Étienne Pommier.
Hello everyone. Today, for the second part of this podcast about the wines of the Loire, I propose you to start tasting some rosés before we move to reds and finish with sweet wines. To write this podcast, I have used the books Vine and Wines of the Loire Valley, published in 2011 by La Nouvelle République. A podcast where we will talk about 3 Michelin star chefs, Wimbledon and Noble Rot. And today, we start our tour in Anjou to taste a unique style of French rosé. If Provence is by far the number one French region for the production of rosé wines, the Loire Valley has no less than 5 different appellations for this shade. There are Pinot Noir rosés in Sancerre and some made of Gamays or Pinot Meunier in Touraine. But the heart of the production is in Anjou, under 2 main AOPs, Cabernet d'Anjou and Rosé d'Anjou. Cabernet d'Anjou is the only French appellation dedicated to off-dry and semi-sweet rosé wines, typically between 10 and 20 grams of residual sugar. As the name suggests, it is made only from Cabernet, Franc or Sauvignon, which gives it an intense pink color with aromas of gooseberry and rhubarb mixed with a slightly herbaceous note. Rosé d'Anjou, on the other hand, can be made with most varieties planted in the valley, including Gros Lot, a local cultivar making lifted and joyful wines with a floral touch. One of the loveliest examples of Gros Lot rosé has to be the Rosé d'un Soir by Marc Angéli at the Ferme de la Sansonnière, a leading producer in the region. While mainstream cuvées of Cabernet or Rosé d'Anjou are often a little bland, it is worth taking some time tasting from cellar to cellar to find the wine you like, for the fruity balance of these wines makes an ideal amuse-bouche before tasting Loire Valley red wines. The great diversity of terroirs and climates on the banks of the river has given birth to a wide range of styles and grape varieties, starting with Pinot Noir that came to Sancerre from its Burgundy homeland. Before the phylloxera crisis in the 19th century, the village's slopes were mainly planted with reds, and it was only after the destruction of the vineyards that Sauvignon Blanc was massively replanted. Today, Pinot Noir makes about 20% of the AOC total vineyard acreage, and the production is limited to a handful of producers, but with amazing success. On the clayey calcareous soils of Sancerre, Pinot shows a fresher and racier profile compared to the Côte d'Or, but with a firm grain of tannins that gives red Sancerre a good aging potential. Their flavor profile ranges from bergamot and cranberries to ripe cherry and mulberry, supported by a moderate oak influence. The leaders of the appellations are the Vacheron family, with single vineyards such as the Beldam showing remarkable persistence. Another leading domain is run by Pinard brothers Florent and Clément, with cuvées such as Charles-Louise and Vendange-Entière that have become references of the appellation, deserving 5-6 years cellaring before revealing their true potential. If it doesn't have the nobility of Pinot Noir, another variety offers plenty of freshness, Pinot d'Aunis. One of the lesser-known cultivars in the valley, Pinot d'Aunis or Chenin Noir gives its best in the Coteaux du Vendomois area, with a combination of brisk acidity, slightly firm tannins, and modest color intensity. If juicy and acid-driven reds with strawberry and white pepper aromas are your thing, then you should try out the wines at Domaine Patrice Collin. Proposing a spicier and more floral aromatic spectrum, another indigenous variety, Gros Lot, is also started to gain a reputation for red wines and not just rosés, with its deep purple color, fine structure, and bright acid. A great example of the superior quality the variety can achieve, especially coming from old vines, is the Gros Lot cuvée made in Anjou by Claude Denel, with its subtle blueberry and violet notes. Often a bit wild and rustic, Malbec, locally known as Co, can sometimes give supple and complex wines, especially coming from old vines, like the Vieille Vigne at La Grange-Tiphaine. Little known by the public, these varieties and their terroir have been making a name for themselves over the last 25 years, thanks to a new generation of growers looking to preserve and promote this heritage. And one of the iconic appellations of this renewal is the Côte Roannaise. In the 1930s, Roanne is a small industrial town specialized in textile and metalworking industry, when a young couple from Burgundy settles in the hotel-restaurant in front of the train station, Jean-Baptiste and Marie Troisgros. In 1957, their sons Jean and Pierre renamed the establishment Les Frères Troisgros and start making noise by creating in 1962 a dish that would eventually become a classic in French cuisine, salmon fillet in sorrel sauce. Back then, Roanne is a key stop about an hour from Lyon on the National Road 7, halfway between Paris and the Côte d'Azur. The growing reputation of the restaurant earns them a Michelin star in 1955. Another one will come in 1965, and the crowning moment for the brothers will be in 1968 and their third Michelin star. As early as the 1970s, the brothers start featuring on their menu the local wines from the neighboring Côte Roannaise. Made from Gamays Saint-Romain, a close relative to the Beaujolais iconic grape, these are soft and easy reds typically served in pitchers as house wine in the local taverns. Convinced that the Côte can produce serious wines, the two chefs partner with vintner Robert Serrol in 1978 to select every year a cuvée Troisgros to be served in their restaurant. In 1992, Pierre Troisgros will go even further by investing with the vigneron in the Blondin vineyards that will become the symbol of both families' passion for this terroir. In the mid-1990s, Stéphane Serrol and his wife Karine take over the family domain and start restoring vineyards, determined to prove that the Côte Roannaise can produce fine wines. They convert the domain to organic, then biodynamic farming, and their efforts, combined with those of other producers such as the Domaine des Potiers, eventually pay off. Since the turn of the century, the quality has been constantly rising to the amazement of all tasters. Gamays Saint-Romain is perfectly suited to this granite slope between 400 and 600 meter altitude and yields juicy and seductive wine with captivating flavors of wild strawberry, crushed pepper, and fine tannins, as well as reasonable ABV levels and a freshness that sets them apart from their Beaujolais cousins. Single vineyard wines, such as Houdan from Domaine Serrol or l'Intégrale from Domaine des Potiers, give us the opportunity to taste the depth and intensity that the wines of the Côte are capable of. Their nuances of blackcurrant and licorice add extra layers of complexity and confirm that this terroir, virtually unknown 30 years ago, has now become a reference. Literature and gastronomy often pair very well, and many writers have celebrated the vine in their work, from Montesquieu to Alexandre Dumas. But none of them has pushed the passion so far as to print on the cover of his books vigneron as a credential. No one except writer and poet Paul-Louis Courrier, who was dead serious about the organization of his wine estate La Chavonnière in Touraine. In the Garden of France, the ties between fine words and fine wines date back to François Rabelais, who wrote 500 years ago, "No respectable man dislikes good wine." And the one that Rabelais cherished the most was the wine of Chinon. Located between the Loire and the Vienne rivers, the Chinon appellation is located at the foot of the massive royal fortress towering above the old city. The lord of these lands is the Cabernet Franc, locally known as Breton, but no one really knows why. Is it because the wine was transported on the river by boatmen from Brittany? Or because some vines were planted around here by an Abbé Breton? No one knows for sure. But what is clear is that Cabernet Franc came from Bordeaux to find its hangout in Chinon, a terroir that can be classified in three categories: the sands, the calcareous slopes, and the flint-rich clays. The sands give rather light-bodied and tender wines, charming with their supple textures and fruity nose. The calcareous slopes give broad and powerful wines with asserted structures of chalky tannins built for long aging. and the clay soils produce rich and profound reds. The aromatic profile of Chinon Cabernet Franc features notes of raspberry, peony, and even rhubarb in cooler vintages, with more lift compared to Bordeaux. The quality of Chinon wines today owes much to a prime scientist, philosopher of taste, and a great educator, enologist Jacques Puiset. Born in 1927, this doctor in sciences moved to Chinon in 1959 and encourages growers to adjust their viticultural practices in order to obtain higher quality fruit to make finer wines. His motto: a fair wine should have the looks of the terroir, the character of the vintage, and have the guts of the vigneron who made it. For Puiset, it's all about taste, and fair taste. A Chinon wine should not taste like Cabernet Franc. It should have the chalky finesse and velvety tannins of La Croix Boissée by Bernard Baudry, the sunny power and density of Philippe Allier's Coton Noir, or the floral elegance of Charles Joguet's Varennes du Grand Clos. Co-founder of the Institut du Goût in 1976, he has worked his whole life to educate people's taste, and especially children, doing workshops in primary schools as easily as speaking in conferences to Michelin-starred chefs. And it's not by chance if masters such as Pierre Troisgros or Alain Sandrins have worked with him to perfect their craft. Beyond these go-to producers and the well-known historical houses, engaged tasters, curious to sample the many interpretations of Chinon, may try the wines of Pierre and Bertrand Coulis, Domaine de Palus, or the Domaine des Frères. To be historically accurate, I have to say that the Chinon wine mentioned by Rabelais was typically white, but it is as a red wine that the village has earned its reputation, just like its neighbors on the other side of the Loire, Bourgueil and Saint-Nicolas. Protected to the north by woodland hills, the vineyards of Bourgueil extend over two main types of terroir: alluvial terraces, close to the river, more or less sandy or gravelly, and the clayey calcareous slopes. It's worth mentioning that the limit between Bourgueil and Saint-Nicolas only corresponds to the boundary between both villages, and not a difference in terroir. Silica-rich terraces produce more fruit-driven, earlier ripening, and easy-to-approach wines thanks to their red-fruited profile, such as La Source by Yannick Amiro. However, some old vine cuvées do show more depth and volume, like the cuvée La Chevalerie from Domaine de la Chevalerie. The higher parts of the slope are mainly calcareous with very little soil, and the wines tend to be elegant and fresh with plenty of charm. Finally, the heart of the south-exposed slope gives the most complete and intense wines with complex bouquets of peony, red berries, and elderberry, supported by a firm structure of powdery tannins and high acid, built for long-term aging. Amongst these high-end terroirs, making great wines, the Clos Nouveau by Domaine de Bel-Air, les Perriere by Catherine and Pierre Breton, or the superb cuvée Mi-Pente by Domaine de la Butte. In the hands of seasoned winemakers as well as gifted young producers, the future is bright for Bourgueil and Saint-Nicolas. And in order to finish our tour of the great Loire Valley Cabernet Franc, we only have to cross the river to visit a close relative, the wine of Saumur-Champigny. Starting opposite Chinon, the terroir of Saumur-Champigny lies on the same calcareous subsoil but with a deeper layer of clay that gives its wine a velvety and silky quality, contrasting with the rectitude of Chinon. The red wines of Saumur owe their reputation to the talent of vintners such as Thierry Germain or Charlie and Nadi Foucault at the Clos Rougeard, and it is one of their wines that will make history and place Saumur on the map in the early 1990s. 1993, Paris. A Pomerol 1990 blind tasting is organized for an assembly of sommeliers and wine critics. Among the wines to be poured, Petrus, Le Pin, and Trotanois, so the organizers mean business. But they also want to play a little, so they hide a pirate in the lineup, a 1990 Le Bourg from Clos Rougeard. The event kicks off, and the tasters start assessing the wines and take notes that will eventually be aggregated to find the best wine of the tasting. And when the results are finally revealed, everybody in the room is in shock. a Saumur Champigny has come on top of all the finest Pomerol chateaus. It's as if a player from the qualifiers had won Wimbledon after beating Nadal, Federer and Djokovic. The domain's reputation is now made, and the Clos Rougeard will become a true Grand Cru of the Loire and set an example to follow for a whole generation of growers. Saumur Champigny wines propose a softer and slightly gentler profile compared to Chinon or Bourgogne, but with equal persistence and complexity on aromas of black cherry and violet, with a velvety mouthfeel, especially old vine cuvées. Nowadays, bottles from the Domaine des Roches-Neuves, Domaine du Collier or Romain Guiberto have become references of the appellation, while other producers like Antoine Sancerre or Domaine des Sancerre are still on the rise. And since 2006, a new appellation led by young growers fully committed to organic viticulture has been the talk of the town. Sancerre puis Notre-Dame, with estates such as Domaine Mélaric or Domaine de la Renière. There's still one style of wine we haven't talked about, and yet it is for me the most compelling expression of Chenin Blanc from the Loire: sweet wines. According to their sugar concentration, there are mainly two different types. From 12 to 45 grams per liter are the wines labeled moelleux, and over 45 grams per liter are technically sweet wines or vin doux that can be around 50-60 grams or in excess of 150-180. This is the residual sugar that the yeast couldn't ferment, and its level depends on the terroir and vintage characteristics. It comes from berries that have accumulated sugars to reach overripeness and that wine growers have decided to harvest later than the rest of the crop. The second factor of sugar concentration in the grapes is a fungus called Botrytis cinerea that, under specific conditions of warmth, sunshine and humidity, will attack the berries. But instead of normally rotting them, it will desiccate and concentrate them as well as transform their structure and aromas, hence its nickname of noble rot. In the vineyard, these shriveled and wizened berries, brownish in color, may not look like fine wine material, and most people would likely throw them away. But make no mistake, these grapes produce some of the world's most compelling wines. In the Loire Valley, sweet wine production is centered around Touraine and Anjou. The appellations of Vouvray, Montlouis and Janières share the same limestone subsoil of Tuffeau and the same mild climate that allows growers to pick later with overripeness and some botrytis. In a typical vintage in Touraine, sweet wines would have 40 to 60 grams per liter of residual sugar, showing aromas of quince, William's pear, and acacia honey, with a soft mouthfeel balanced by Chenin's zesty acid. You simply have to try the wines by Damien Pinot or Vincent Carême in Vouvray, Domaine de Bellivia in Janières, or François Chiden in Montlouis to get the idea. But if these wines are so charming and fruity when young, they really show their true greatness over time, with nuances of spices, almonds, and silky textures that are just superb. This is especially true for the very sweet cuvées of Vouvray and Montlouis, typically over 100 grams per liter of residual sugar, bearing the denomination Première Tri, or first sorting. This term, referring to the selective picking of botrytized berries only, is the one found on the best vintages of historical houses such as Huet, and the 1990 vintage wines by growers like Foro or Alias are still amazingly fresh today, 30 years after harvest. But considering the sugar concentration in itself is pointless. It is the balance between sweetness and acidity that makes great wines. A balance achieved by Chenin Blanc's acid backbone. No matter how high the sugar concentration may be, the grape has this rare ability to always keep a high level of acid, which explains why the Loire Valley is such an outstanding terroir for botrytized wines, and especially in Anjou. Anjou AOPs such as Coteau du Layon, Bonzo, or Quart de Chaume are appellations fully dedicated to sweet wines. As we've seen in the previous episode, the schist terroirs of Anjou produce the boldest and richest Chenin wines in the valley. This is partly due to the mild climate of the area that allows very long hang time, so that the berries can achieve very high levels of ripeness. Besides, some vineyards are located on the banks of rivers such as the Aubances or the Léon, which create favorable conditions for the development of botrytis. Finally, Anjou winemakers also use occasionally the passerillage technique, which means that the bunches are left on the vines to shrivel and concentrate even further. For all these reasons, Chenin Blanc can achieve here ridiculously high levels of concentration, and vintners Patrick Baudouin and Joe Piton have experimented for years with very late harvests well into November to pick berries, giving wines with hundreds of grams of residual sugar. More reasonably, Côte du Léon typically show 100 to 120 grams of sugar, when Bonzo and Quart de Chaume, which was classified as Grand Cru in 2011, are usually between 150 and 180, possibly higher. But then again, sugar in itself means nothing. It is the balance that matters. Growers don't try to make wine sweet and syrupy like honey. The magic of sweet Loire Chenin Blanc is that underlying chiseled acidity that always keeps the wines balanced no matter how rich they may be. And with aromatic profiles offering notes of Mirabelle plum, quince and tarte tatin with nuances of ginger and saffron, they display a level of complexity that makes them truly exceptional. The Quart de Chaume from Claude Papin or Château de Bellerive, Bonzo from Château de Ferle or Domaine des Petits Carres, and Côte du Léon by Marc Angély or Domaine Augereau are all compelling examples of sweet Chenin wines in Anjou. And in terms of aging potential? Well, the vignerons of Bonzo answered that question once and for all in September 2018 by opening for tasting old vintages such as a 1945 from Domaine Proto and a 1921 from Domaine des Terres Brunes that were still dazzling nearly a century after harvest. And this is where our journey ends, with a sip of sweetness, history and magic on the banks of the Loire. I hope you now feel like exploring some of these vineyards, meeting the growers, and sampling some of these wines in whichever style you prefer. For this diversity of wines made in the valley is what makes the Loire so special and almost as charming as the beautiful landscapes of the river and its lovely chateaux.